Good morning, everybody. So I am Sherika Nicole. I am the owner of Hung Up Boutique. I am also the founder and creator of Define, Plan, and Execute Your Vision. Through that company, I host vision board events twice a year. As well as through that company, I also encourage and motivate other individuals to step into their greatness, to dig deep down on the inside, to figure out what their purpose is so that they can walk in it and that they can take control of what it is that they want to do. So that's what I do in that business and Hung Up Boutique. Of course, it is for women. Sorry, fellas. Young girls, women. You can shop online at www.gethungup.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Hung Up Boutique. I am also a mother, an encourager, an influencer, a friend, a daughter. I am the go-to person. Yes, I am. Everyone comes to me. Why? Because they love me. No, they love me and they know that I'm going to give them that real. So again, I'm Sherika Nicole. You can definitely tap it up if it's anything that's resonating that I'm going to say that's going to resonate with you. You can share it with a friend. I just wanted to jump on Tuesday. I did a scope about talking about many talk but few execute, and during the ending of the scope, I started talking about taking ownership and how we take ownership of our life and in our life and of the things that have happened to us that we have a tendency to let it hold us back, right? Because we have this thing of blaming others, right? And for a long time, that was something that I did. I blamed others for just my upbringing. I blamed others for the way I behaved. I blamed others for so many things. But it's true that these individuals may have done something to you, or they may have caused you to grow up in a certain environment, or they may have done something that impacted your life, right? They impacted your life, but it is up to you to take ownership on how you are going to react and how you are going to allow that impact to affect your life. So we have to make sure that we are taking ownership in what's going on in our life. You know, for me, I was raised by my grandmother and my parents. Both of my parents were in and out of our lives. That's something that you can read about in my book once it's released. I'm not going to really touch on it too much, but my parents were in and out of our lives, right? So we were technically raised by our grandmother. So for a long time, I grew up, I had to step up because I was the oldest of my sisters and brothers. So for a long time, I blamed my parents, right? And we often blame others because it's easier to take the focus off of ourselves. But when we're blaming others for the way that we behave or the way our life turned out, those others are going on about their business, and you are still stuck in the past, or you are still stuck by the impact of what it caused. So what you have to realize and what you have to do in that is, although you were impacted, you have to figure out how you're going to overcome that. You don't want to end up living in that impactness. You don't want to end up living in, oh, I wasn't raised by my parents, so I'm going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. You know, you don't want to make up excuses. And we see that a lot. You know, yes, young boys need their fathers. Yes, young girls need their mothers and their fathers. And even young guys, they need their mothers and their fathers. However, that is not always how the ball bounces. So, with that being said, you have to make sure that you are taking ownership and you're stop blaming. It's then time for you to examine yourself, because at the end of it all, you can't be in that classroom when you're in high school saying, oh, I don't have my mom and dad, can you have mercy on me with this grade? You still have to take ownership in your life to do what it is that you know that you can do. So what I decided to do in my life is to take ownership, right? I took ownership for all the impacts that happened in my life. I ended up taking those, I just had the word, right? And it just left me. So I end up taking the negative. We'll use that word. I end up taking the negative and I end up turning it into positive. I ended up realizing that if I keep hanging on to what happened to me, I am not going to get far in life. So therefore, I had to start taking what happened to me and I had to start turning it around. I had to start using it to educate others on how I got over the hurdle. I started using it in my own life with my own children to make sure that I don't end up doing the same thing that my parents did with me when I was growing up. So it's ways for you to take ownership. You just have to figure out that way, and you have to be willing. Number one, you have to be willing to realize that you can change. You have to be willing to realize that I don't have to allow this impact to hold me back. You have to be willing to get past. You have to be willing to accept what has happened to you, knowing that that's not who you are, knowing that you're capable of change, knowing that yes, I didn't have both of my parents in the household all the time and I wanted them there, but I had someone that still loved me. And not to say that my parents loved me any less, it's just they weren't there. They were still figuring it out, right? So I can't blame something on them that they technically didn't probably learn themselves. So it's like a trickle effect. We have to make sure, though, that we are taking ownership, because when you fill out that job application or when you go to that job, you can't bring up the past impacts that happened to you and think they're going to have mercy on you. They're not. So what you have to do is be able to overcome those things and make sure that you're taking full ownership in your life, that you're willing to make a change, that you're willing to get to the next level. And number two, once you're willing, you then have to realize that it's all on you, and it's only two, willing and knowing that it's all on you, right? It's going to always fall back on you. No one is going to say, oh, what did your mom and your kids or whoever did, or and not to be so harsh, but not with the person that molested you. They're not going to ask you that, because guess what? They don't know that. They don't know all this stuff happened to you. So you have to be willing, and you have to realize that it's going to be all on you. You have to decide that I either want to change or I want to just wallow in this impact. I want to just stay right here where this impact hit me at. And I want to just stay right here because I can't change. Because I can't do anything different. Hold on, let me turn the air on. Yeah, you want to make sure that, maybe that's not a good idea. Let me crack the windows. Okay, I'll crack the windows because you guys are going to hear it. Okay, so, sorry about that. So, you have to make sure that that impact doesn't affect you your whole life. You know, you want to make sure that you are taking ownership. And by you taking ownership, you have to be willing, and you have to know that it's on you. It's on you to make the change. It's on you to accept the fact that, yes, I was molested when I was 7 years old, but this is what I'm going to do to get over this. Don't live in that impact. Don't let that hold you back from greatness. You know, you can take that story And you can encourage other women that has been impacted by that has been living with that for years. And it's something that you will live with most likely for the rest of your life. But once you realize how to get over it and not laying that impact, then you will be okay. So I just wanted to get on. I just wanted this to be really quick. It was just something that was on my mind since Tuesday, just to talk about us taking ownership and us taking responsibility for things in our life. You know, we can't always blame the past. And I say that because I am surrounded by so many people, right? That's even in relationships. When we get hurt as men and women, we tend to take that into the next relationship, right? And by us taking that into the next relationship, we aren't allowing that person in. So again, it goes back to number one, to where you have to be willing. So, prime example, I've dated someone in the past where they were hurt, and he brought that into what it was that we were trying to figure out, right? He brought that into our new relationship, into us dating. So eventually, he wasn't willing to let go of what hurt he had in the past. So he brought that into ours, which then caused us to not be able to grow as one, because he was worried about the past. So he wasn't willing to let it go. He didn't realize that at the end of the day, it is all on you to make the decision that, okay, this is someone that may be good for me. This is someone that is good for me. Let me try to figure it out with this person. Instead, he brought in the old with the new. And the old and the new didn't mix, because I wasn't going for it, right? So again, it's just going to always come back to you being willing to make the change, and you falling on you to know that you are going to accept the change, right? And that's what we have to do. That's what we have to do in business when we fail. When we fail, it's still going to fall back on you to take ownership, to figure out why you failed. You have to be willing to go through your bookkeeping, to go through your sale for the last 3 years and figure out how you ended up here in your 4th year. So it's always going to go back to you being willing. We have to be willing to accept change. We have to be willing to take ownership, and the only way we have to be willing is to accept it. So you want to accept change, you want to take ownership, but you can't take ownership if you're not willing to take ownership. You can't take ownership if you don't realize that it's falling back on you, right? So, you know, again, just keep those two things in mind. Be willing, knowing it's on you. And everything we do, right? It's going to always fall back on you. When you're planning your business, when you're trying to execute things, it falls on you and how you operate in your everyday life. What are you telling yourself at night when no one else is there? What are you telling yourself when you're just driving in the car and it's just you in the car? You know, so we have to make sure that we are willing. We have to make sure that we are doing what it is that we need to do to make sure that we are going to be successful in life, that we're not going to allow those hindrances that happened in our past to hold us back, that we're going to not allow the impacts, because some of us got impacts that happen. I have impacts that happen, but I decided I I didn't want to lay in that. I decided that I didn't want that to be my crutch. I decided that I didn't want to be in that space anymore. You know, and it's people that's in that space and they smiling at you every day. It's people that's in that space and they're sitting next to you at church. It's people that's in that space and they're up in the pulpit. It's people that's in that space and they're doing videos like I'm doing right now. It's people that are like that. They're allowed. However, though, Those people that are still getting in those platforms, they are trying. They are fighting daily to say, you know what, Lord? I know it's something greater for me. I know that it's something greater than me. So therefore, I'm going to still just step out here, even though I don't feel like it today. I'm still going to do it because I don't want this to hold me back. So we just have to make sure that we are taking ownership. And that's for everything in our life. I just told my son that with his job, he like, oh, this job is stupid, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, how? You was late. You have to take ownership in this. Why was you late? Oh, the public transportation. Okay. Well, that means if you have to be at work at 2:30, then guess what? You need to be leaving at 12 o'clock. If I know I got to be to work at 8 and I'm leaving an hour early in the car, then you definitely need to be leaving 2.5 hours early. That's just what it takes. That's what happens when you don't take ownership, when you don't recognize that it's you put the blame on other people. When you're not taking ownership, you're putting the blame on other people. I want you to understand that. If you don't get nothing else out of this video, I want you to understand that for you, in order for you to take ownership, you have to stop putting the blame on other people. Regardless of what took place, you have to figure out what happened with me. How did this happen? And I'm not talking about those that were molested, those that were raped. Those are situations that are real sensitive and tough. But again, in everything else, we have to make sure that we are taking ownership. We are willing. Once we realize that we're going to take ownership, after examining ourselves and what took place in ourselves and why we're in this position and who we've been blaming, we then have to be willing to take the steps to change. And those steps is first recognizing that you are the problem. You most likely are the problem, and the reason why I say you are the problem, because you're not taking ownership. And we have to take ownership. And once we take ownership, we then can move forward with everything else in our life. We have to stop blaming others for why we're in the positions that we're in today. I am 40. I cannot still blame on my parents. Like, if I wasn't in a space that I wanted to be in, I can't keep blaming that on them, right? I did something along the way, right? So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about. What did you allow to happen in your life after that impact? So that's just like someone that has an accident. Yes, someone else did it. Yes, someone did. Someone did it. Yes, someone hit this person, caused them to be able to not walk. But then it is up to that person to be willing to say, you know what, I'm not going to lay in this impact. You know what, yeah, they told me I can't walk, but guess what, I'm about to get up and I'm going to walk. I'm going to try to walk. I'm going to get therapy. That's how you take ownership of your life. When you don't lay in it, and death is a sensitive topic as well. And when individuals die, some people just lose their mind. Some people are not able to cope. But again, it comes back to you taking ownership of your life. Yes, I lost my loved one. Yes, I missed them dearly. But no, I'm not about to lay down in this impact and let it take over my life. And that's what I'm talking about when I say take ownership. You can still mourn. You can still miss that person. But that person don't want you to lay down and die right along with them. And when I say die, I mean die mentally. It's in the mind. We die mentally, and then it affects us physically because it's what we're thinking. So as a man thinketh, so is he. So if you're laying defeated in your mind, then guess what? It's going to eventually grow out in the physical, and it's going to die. You're going to start feeling tired. You're going to start having issues within your body, because guess what? You already was defeated in your mind. So you need to make sure that you, again, are willing to change. You are willing to accept what has happened in your life, knowing that it's not the end. And it starts in the mind. It always go back to the mind. How are you thinking? How are you handling this? What can I do to change my thoughts about this situation? So I literally did not mean to go on this long, but when I say just some emotions just rose up because I'm in my mind. I know people. I feel so bad because I'm like, oh, I thought you were stronger than this, but I can't. My strength is not their strength, right? My faith is not their faith. The only thing I can do is pray for them, and pray that by you going to church and by you reading the word and by you listening to these videos that you get it, that it click, that you end up and decide to be willing to not lay down and die mentally, because it's going to eventually affect you physically. So I am Sherika Nicole. Take ownership of some things that's going on in your life. I know some of the things that you're going to have to take ownership of is going to be more harder than some other things, but you have to sit down and you have to examine yourself and examine where you are in your life right now and ask yourself, how did I end up here? Why am I here? Did I allow this impact in my life? That I allow this impact in my life to cause me to die mentally? That I allow this impact in my life to cause me to end up in the position that I'm in right now? That I allow this hindrance in my life? That I allow this abuse in my life from 15 years ago to cause me to not love another man? That I allow this abuse from my father or my brother or my mother or my grandmother to cause me to not trust another person? Did this abuse cause me to be mad and lash out at my children? We have to go dig deep down on the inside and figure out what it is. Did the way that I don't love myself, is it because I didn't have my father? You know what I'm saying? These are some deep-rooted questions that we avoid on a day-to-day because we don't want to get nitty-gritty with it. We want that surface level stuff. We want that stuff that's going to just be like, oh, and then you want individuals in your space that's going to pacify you. No, get you some individuals that's going to challenge you to be greater. Get you some individuals around you that's going to challenge you to be great, to dig deep, and to work on those roots, them deep-rooted issues that you got, that you claim you don't have. And if you can be real and honest with yourself after you see this video, take 15 to 20 minutes and sit down and ask yourself those questions. Ask yourself, how can I take ownership of my life in this area? Focus on one area, because I know for a fact it's more than one. But you got to be willing. You got to be willing to get knit and grit with it. You got to be willing to dig deep down on the inside. I've been dealing with one myself. And this, I've been dealing with one myself. But we got to figure out why. We got to figure out, why am I like this? Why am I like this when it comes to this particular subject, right? Why don't I love myself? That's what you got to ask yourself. Why, when I look at myself in the mirror naked with nothing on, why don't I love myself? You got to ask yourself why. Take ownership of that. That's how you take ownership, because you try to figure out a solution to your problem. And there's so many of us that's just got problems that we don't want to really figure out the issue to. We want a surface level solution. No, how about you get a deep rooted solution? You know, I'm going to say this last thing and I'm getting off. I remember I wanted a breast implant. And I had to look at myself one day. And I'm real, and I don't know why I'm going here this morning, but somebody needs to hear this, right? And it's still about me taking ownership, and this ownership of my life and how I felt about myself. So I wanted to get a breast implant. Long story short, then I had to ask myself. I looked in the mirror, and this is like I'm getting out the shower, and I talk to myself in the mirror. I talk to myself, I examine myself, and I hope you're doing the same, both male and females. So I was looking at myself, and I was like, Sherika, why don't you like what God has blessed you with? And that's me talking about my breast. And I remember it was so vivid. The exact words that a guy said to me, he made a comment about it, right? And it made me, that seed that he planted, right, made me feel some type of way. So then, I always keep my shirt on. And that's over some people's head, but you should know what I'm talking about. So I then had to decide one day, some years ago, because I'm against all that plastic stuff. So I had to decide one day, after I figured out what was the solution to, what was the it was an impact to me. That was an impact, right? Because it was a seed that I carried. It was a seed that was planted in my head that I carried, and I was carrying it for years. But it was causing, in certain relationships, was coming to issue. So I had to decide what's the issue, right? So then I had to go back to myself and figure it out. So that's something that's minor, but it's also something that I carried with me that started to affect me in the next relationship I got in. So luckily that person had a voice. So then by that person having a voice, it then caused me to then go back and try to dig deep down to figure out why I felt this way about myself. So I felt this way because a seed was planted. But then it was up to me to take ownership over that seed and then start speaking what into myself. Oh, so when I stand in front of myself in the mirror now, oh, I love your C-bomb. Yeah, they your mouth full, they good. That's what I'm saying. That's ownership. You have to take ownership. Those impacts are going to come. They're going to continue. They're going to constantly come throughout your life. The impacts are not going to go anywhere. But how you respond to the impact and how you allow the impact to affect you is going to make the difference. So I just wanted to share that. I am at 30 minutes. Wow. But when something is good, a good topic that you're talking on, and this is just something that I just wanted to share. We are wonderfully made. Look that up. Just Google wonderfully made by the Lord, because I don't know the scripture and I'm normally on point when it comes to that, but that's just something on top of my head. So again, I am Sherika Nicole. You can follow me on Instagram at I am Sherika Nicole. My business pages is Hung Up Boutique. My other one is DPE Your Vision. You can also follow my Facebook page, my Facebook public page for Sherika Nicole. You can also follow my group pages, DPE Your Vision, Fancy and Fit Challenge. Fancy and Fresh Fit Challenge. And you can tap it up. Give me some hearts. Share this broadcast if it resonated with you. Share it with a friend. Tell a friend. Tap it up. Make sure you give me some hearts. Again, y'all have a blessed day. Remember, the dream is dead without you. Remember, it is all on you. And you have to be willing to take ownership over your life. And you have to realize that it is all on you to take that ownership. Peace.